In this video, we are going to discuss about how to write insert query statements required to insert data into brand, product, GRN, GRN item, stock, invoice and invoice item tables. So this is the continuation of the earlier shoe center database where we have already entered data to the user table. Here I will show the earlier shoe center database. Here we have already entered the user data, user type data and gender, city, address. We have already entered the relevant data. Gender. There is a small update or change to be made. In the task 34 I mentioned in the requirement the earlier shoe center, the client earlier shoe center, they have take the user type into they have taken it considered it as a one-to-many relationship, because in the requirement they have given the user type within the user table, but the general situation is both can't be a one-to-many relationship, because a customer can be supplier, user or a employee, as well as user. In the user type there can be within the employees there can be many users, so there's a many-to-many relationship. So I will delete this relationship and build a many-to-many relationship as I created before. If we need to get any data between these tables, we will join the table and get the result set. So I will create a many-to-many relationship, a many-to-many identifying relationship between these tables. So here the table is user has user type, and I will remove the primary keys of this table and make them as a foreign keys. So the user has user type. In this table only the relevant user's ID with the user type ID mentioned. Now if the user ID 1 and the user type ID equals 1, now for example user ID is 1 and the name is Sahan, and the user type ID is also 3. The user type is employee. So that's how it comes. Now I will synchronize this model and update this model. That means now it will be updated in our database as well. Now I have updated or synchronized my data model, and in the database side also now it must be updated. We'll see user table. I will restart and see, because I changed it. No, sometimes a bug may occur. Now we will see. Now see the user type is also there. Now here within the user, now user type is not there. Now we need to first complete the user has user type and move on to the product and brand, the mentioned tables as here the mentioned table as here. We'll move into those after adding the user and the user type. Here I have add the relevant user ID. Now here Thilan with the relevant user type ID. Thilan is an employee. Now here if we take Hasita or Hasita, he is a supplier. Now the update is made. Now we will see the requirements and create the product table. Sorry, I have already created the product table. We will insert the data to the product table. So this is the continuation of earlier shoe center DB. So I will again read the requirement or condition, and we will move to the entering data into the tables. So the bill book system is used to keep information on the bills of the shoe store called Aralia Shoe Center. This method is used for a long time, but using this method will embarrass the shop owner and employees. The accountant working in the shop pointed out to the shop owner the disadvantages of the bill book system. Disadvantages point out were the loss of bill books, damage to bill books, and the need for separate space for storing bill books. Because of these factors, the store owner realizes that the bill book system is difficult to use and decides to use computer software. This software was developed by AI Soft, a software development company. You work as a senior software engineer at this company. You and your team are tasked with creating the database of this software. Create the required ER diagram for that. To do this, follow the instructions below. Name the database as Aralia Shoe Center, which is already done. We have named the database Aralia Shoe Center and created all the databases within the videos 31, 32, 33 and 34. Do watch those previous videos if you had watched the previous video before coming to this point. So we will enter the data in the brand table where the brand ID brand name is DSI. So we will insert here query. I will clear the already written query and write the new query. Insert into, here we need to insert into brand. Brand, and we must mention the column name. Brand name, and then the values. We no need to mention the ID because it's a auto increment, no, so we no need to mention. We'll brand name is enough because it's a watch. Now we will mention the values. Values must be written within a single quote, and end of the query we must mention this semicolon. The value is DSI. Now we will execute this query statement and see whether it is entered. Now in data, where the brand DSI is entered. Likewise, we will enter rest of the data into the brand table. Here I have entered all the required brand names to the brand table. Now we will move on to the next requirement. Enter the data in the product table in the table below into the product table. So here from the table below we must enter the relevant data into the relevant column of the product table. We will enter it also. Insert into, we will edit this query, product. First, I think the product name comes product name, and then the description and the brand ID. Description and then the brand ID. Here the values are follows. We write the values Parks. Product name is Parks Men's. Values Parks Men's, comma, within single quotation the description. The description is this description, and then I will break it here for a clear view. and then we must mention the brand ID. The brand ID is 2. That means I think Bata. So when we are mentioning ID, we no need to mention it within a single quotation. So I have mentioned the ID. Now we will execute this and see. Here I have forgot to mention the comma. Now okay. Brand ID, wait, in the product, it's brand ID. Sorry, we will take its brand ID. Now we will execute. Okay. We can't enter this unless the GRN table is fixed. Wait, there's a update to me be made with in the relationship between the product table and GRN item. Here I have mentioned the relationship between product and GRN item. It is a one-to-many relationship. That means within a GRN item can consist many products, while a product can only no excuse. In a GRN item there can be many products, and in a product there can only be one GRN item ID. So I will edit this relationship. So I will delete this relationship product, and as per the requirement, the GRN item table consists of stock ID. Okay, GRN ID also does not consist of the GRN ID. No, so in the we'll see the GRN table, GRN ID, date, and user ID. GRN ID, user ID. Then it must contain the GRN ID also. Why it doesn't mention the GRN ID? The GRN ID. Okay, they have mixed up. Okay. The GRN item ID and this is the GRN ID. Okay. They have not clearly mentioned what are the requirements, so I am also a little bit confused. So I will update the relationship between the product and isolate the non-identified relationship and the GRN and the product. So here now the product ID is there. Now I will synchronize my database. Now we will see whether it is updated in the product table. Now now the GRN ID is disappeared. Now we will execute this query and see. Now okay, the query is executed. Now in the product table we will see the data. Now the data is also entered to the product table. Now likewise we will enter the rest of the data to the product table as required. So here I have added all the required data to the product table with the product name, description, and the relevant brand ID. Now we will move on to the next requirement. enter the data in the table below into GRN table. So here we need to enter this data into our GRN table. So we will write the query GRN table, the GRN date and the user ID. So the query comes like this. Insert into GRN where the GRN date, you only need the GRN date and the user ID. GRN date, here we need and the user ID. You see how the user ID is there, and the relevant GRN date is and the user ID is 4. Okay, we will execute this. Now we will see in the data side. The GRN date and the user ID is here. Now we will add the rest of the data. Likewise, we will add the rest of the data also. Here I have added all the required data to the GRN table. Now we will move on to the next requirement. Enter the data into the table in the table below in the GRN item table. So here we must enter these data to the GRN item table. So the GRN item table, I will use the graphical method now here for all insert data. For insert data, I showed you the query statement. Now for this I will use the graphical method to enter the data. So the GRN item. So the GRN item ID can be 1 and the product ID is 2. Here I will little update the order. Here I have ordered the sequence of the columns according to the requirement. Now we will add in. So the GRN ID must be 1. Here the GRN ID must be 1. The product ID 2. Here we will add the GRN ID 1. The product ID is Bata 2. Quantity 32 and the unit selling price is 350. Sorry, the unit price is 350. The selling price is 400 and the stock ID is 1. Selling price is 400 and the stock ID we need to first of all update the stock table and then we will move to the GRN item table. Here also I will use the graphical method to enter the values. Likewise, I will enter the rest of the data. Here I have entered all the required data to the stock table. Now we will continue to enter the data to the GRN item table. Now here I must insert all the required data because the foreign key field was not fulfilled, so the data entered will be automatically deleted. So here the product ID is 2, I think so. Product ID is 2, quantity 32, unit selling price 350, selling price 400 and stock ID 1. Likewise, we will enter rest of the data. Here this is a query. I will show you a query to enter the GRN item tables data. So here I have insert into GRN item the GRN ID, the product ID, quantity, unit price, selling price, stock ID. Now we will write the values for the second data. The second data, the values are 1 1 19 450, 1 1, the quantity is 19 and the unit price is 450, the selling price is 510 and the stock ID is 2. Selling price is 510 and the stock ID is 2. Now we will execute this query statement and see. Now the data for the second row, the second row's data has been entered successfully. Here see. I will reset the sorting. Now okay. Likewise, we will enter the rest of the data. Here we have entered all the data required for the GRN item table as mentioned in the question number 4 or the requirement 4. Now we have already entered the data to the stock table as well. Now we will move on to the invoice table. We will enter the data of the invoice table. So here we need the date and the user ID. So here insert into invoice invoice, we need the date and the user ID. So here the values come as for the date, we will write date and the user ID 3. Date and the user ID 3. We will execute. There's an error. Here no gray isn't mentioned. Now okay. Now we see the data of the invoice. Here now the data is entered. Likewise, we will enter the rest of the data. So here we have entered all the data required for the invoice table. Now we will move on to the next requirement. Here we need to enter the data for the invoice item table with invoice ID, stock ID and quantity. So here we need the invoice item table. We don't need to mention the invoice item ID because it is an auto increment field. We will mention the invoice ID. Also there's a order problem within the columns. I will update it. Now the sequence of the column is right. Now we will enter the relevant data. We need the invoice ID, stock ID and the quantity. Invoice, here we will mention the stock ID. Stock ID, the invoice ID and the quantity. The values must be the, what is the invoice ID? Invoice ID is 1, stock ID is also 1, quantity 10. 1 and the quantity is 10. Now we will execute it. Now we will see the data side. Here the data is been added. Likewise, we will add the rest of the data. Okay, we have added the data to the invoice item table also as required. And that's all for this video. Thank you. Have a nice day.